Welcome back, welcome back. After a 5-month truce, violence broke out this week between Israeli troops and militants in Gaza. At least 7 Palestinians died as a result of Israeli military activity in Gaza and into Gaza. Some 35 rockets have been fired in retaliation at towns in southern Israel, which followed the discovery of a tunnel leading out of Gaza, which Israel says was to be used to kidnap Israeli soldiers. Joining me now from Jerusalem, who's up to speed on everything that's going on there, is Mark Regev, the Israelis' official government spokesman. Mark, welcome back to us again.
Thank you for having me again.
Tell me something, Mark. What state is the truce in today exactly? I mean, is it in intensive care or is it dead?
We hope it's not dead. We want the calm in the south to continue. Ultimately, the peace and quiet is good for both the Palestinian civilian population and the Israeli civilian population. But it was Hamas that torpedoed the quiet with this aggressive move, this tunnel designed to kidnap Israeli soldiers or civilians. It was the exact type of tunnel they used to capture Corporal Shalit, who's now been held hostage in Gaza for more than 2 years. It was an aggressive move by then. Of course, we had to respond.
But I mean, in one sense, they would say that it wasn't in action and so on and so forth, and no one was being killed as a result of it because it was in its early stages and so on. So they say that Israel broke the truce, but you'd say that in fact it was the Hamas who broke the truce.
Exactly. If you build a tunnel like that and you design it to go under Israeli territory in order to kidnap Israeli civilians, that's not the sort of thing that we can sit by idly and ignore. We have to protect our people, and we saw it as an aggressive act and a gross violation of the understandings achieved through Egypt for calm in the south. Also, what we've seen since the Israeli activity, you've seen this barrage, not against military positions, but you've seen Hamas open up once again on all civilian communities in the south, on civilian cities, on farms, on townships, on rural communities. Once again, they are indiscriminately shooting at innocent civilians. This is simply unacceptable.
How do we restore the truce? What would be the means by which the truce could be restored?
Well, if Hamas stops shooting, we will stop shooting. If there is quiet restored, we will be very happy for quiet to be restored. We've been talking to the Egyptians, we've been talking to others. We have no desire whatsoever to see an escalation in the south. And if Hamas sticks by the ceasefire, of course we will too.
And what about the situation at the moment in Israel? You're in a state of hiatus at the moment, really, aren't you, in terms of without an active prime minister to lead things until the election. Is that going to be a lacuna in any negotiations, or can people like Condoleezza Rice, who's there at the moment, or been there at the moment, and can they still make progress?
Yes. The important thing to remember is, though we're heading for elections on February 10th, the Prime Minister remains in charge until the new Prime Minister is elected and sworn in. You cannot have a vacuum. It's a bit like the American system. The outgoing president is president until January 20th. He controls the government, and it's the same on our side. You cannot have a vacuum. There are too many important issues on the table. Just yesterday, my Prime Minister met with the Secretary of State. She met also with Mrs. Livni, the Foreign Minister, and this morning with our Defense Minister. She's meeting the Palestinians now, I believe, as we speak. The process continues. We're looking forward to a summit on Sunday in Egypt, in Sinai, with all the participants of the Annapolis framework. You know, we can't wait. We can't hold out. We have to continue working on a historic reconciliation between Israelis and Palestinians. It's good for both sides.
And Mrs. Livni, is really, she's, as you say, the Prime Minister is still the Prime Minister, and so she is acting now as, is she acting still as Foreign Minister, or is she acting as...
Yes.
Yeah.
She is the Foreign Minister and the leader of the Kadima Party, and she is their candidate for Prime Minister in the next election. But until that election happens, Mr. Olmert remains the Prime Minister. And he said to us very, very seriously, he said to us, as long as he remains Prime Minister and the responsibility of leadership is on his shoulders, he will implement his duties. And he says that in these coming weeks before the election, he wants the process of dialogue to continue with the Palestinian leadership. He wants the process of dialogue to continue with the Syrian leadership. Ultimately, a historic reconciliation between Israel and our Arab neighbours is a national interest in Israel and is above party politics.
And Mrs. Livni, I mean, in terms of her negotiations and her work in this situation, she's going to be full out. But tell me, how would I know you can't take one side or against the other, Mark, I'm sure, in your position, but do you view the fact of Mrs. Livni running the government or Benjamin Netanyahu running the government, would that be very, very different, do you think, for us and the rest of the world?
We'll have to wait and see. It's the Israeli voters will be making their decision on February 10th. It's an important election. As you know, in Israel, we don't just have two parties. Because we have proportional representation, there are many other parties. Mrs. Livni and Mr. Netanyahu head the two larger parties, the Likud and Kadima. I think we have to wait and see. I can tell you, though, the following. It's clear that the Israeli people, by the vast majority, and all polling shows this, want peace with our neighbours, understand that peace requires compromise, and believe in a two-state solution. Israel, free, independent, next to a free, democratic and independent Palestine.
Well, that's very good news as a starting point, and indeed a finishing point too, if all of that can be brought about. How does the news this week from America, that exciting election and the arrival of President-elect Obama, how does that affect Israel, do you think?
Just last night, my Prime Minister, Mr. Olmert, spoke on the telephone with President-elect Obama. They had a good conversation. We congratulated President-elect Obama on his campaign, on his victory. It's an inspiration. It's a historical event that an African-American has been elected President of the United States. I think everyone here in Israel is excited as well. We're looking forward to working with the new administration after January. Israel and America have a special relationship. We've got a strong relationship. We've got an intimate relationship, and we expect that to continue under President Obama.
There was a story, Mark, about the government of Israel recently announcing it was cutting funding for illegal settlements and cracking down on extremist settlers. Is that an important step forward?
You've had a situation where there are some elements on the West Bank in the settler community that believe they're above the law, and that they flout the law either in vigilante violence or in establishing settlements, in establishing communities without receiving approval by the government. And of course that's unacceptable. And what we have to do is make sure that in Israel no one is above the law, and that these people, if they do break the law, will be brought to justice.
Right, well, it's very good to have this chance to talk with you again, and we'll no doubt be talking again in the build-up to the election in February and so on. But Mark, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Mark Regev. We finish today by returning to the man who rules the world. No, not that man, but Lewis Hamilton, the 23-year-old driver who this week became the youngest ever Formula One world champion in just his second season. Lewis came to the studios here last year just after 3 races and 3 podium finishes at the beginning of his career. It was his first television interview, I think, and he captivated everybody, viewers and people here in the studio, and we've all been supporting him ever since. This is Lewis Hamilton after just 3 races last year.
You need to have the determination. You need to have the fire in your heart to keep yourself going, and to get yourself out training every day and preparing yourself for the weekend. And it's no good going into the race hoping to finish 5th. You need to go out wanting to win absolutely every race you compete in.
Yeah. And in terms of the record that you established with the 3 times on the podium out of 3, was that something you were expecting to do?
No, it's definitely not something I was expecting. To be honest, going into my first race, I wasn't expecting to finish on the podium. I was just hoping that I'll get some points, and obviously got 3rd place, and then a 2nd, and a 2nd again in the last race. It's definitely more than I expected, but obviously that's something you would hope for and something you work towards. But already to be doing so well in my such an early start in my career in Formula One, it's just an amazing feeling.
But when was the moment when you fell in love with motor racing? Were you 3 or 5?
No, I think I was 5 or 6.
And when did you meet Ron Dennis? Because he was an important figure, of course your father first and foremost, but Ron, Ron Dennis, I mean, when did you meet him? And your father sent you over to
Yes,
talk to him?
We went to, well, in my second year of karting, I won the British Championship. And as an award, to receive my award, I went to the Autosport Awards down in Park Lane. And I went round with an autograph book my dad had made for me, and said, "Hey, that's Ron Dennis over there. He's the head of McLaren." And up until then, I'd watched Formula One, and the McLaren was my favourite car. So I went over to him and I said, "One day I want to drive your car." And he phoned me in 9 years, and I'll sort you out a deal. And it was quite strange. At 10 years old, you don't really understand that sort of thing. I just wanted to have fun, and that was what I was doing.
But the deal happened in 2 or 3 years rather than 9, didn't it?
It did. We continued karting, continued to be successful, and he contacted us 3 years later, and offered us support, and it sort of started from there.
How long can someone go on? How long could you go on motor racing at the highest level?
I think,
to what age?
If you look at Michael Schumacher,
yeah,
who just retired last year at 37.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a long way to go. I'm only 22. You know, but I really don't know how long I'll be in the sport. I hope I'm in it for a good amount of time. But I'm going to keep doing it until I don't enjoy it anymore.
Until you get it right.
Yeah, until you get it right. But I've got to enjoy it. You've got to enjoy what you do. And you know, as I said, I love doing what I'm doing, and I hope that it continues for many years.
What's the best advice you've had so far?
I actually never give up. I think my dad told me when I was very young, never give up. And I think it was something I was in the gym, or I think I was boxing, you know, training, and he said never give up. You know, go back in there and battle it out until the end.
And that, of course, is exactly what Lewis Hamilton did to win the World Championship last Sunday, keeping on going right to the end, 2 corners from the end, and on to glory. Anyway, congratulations to him. Thanks to all of you, and of course to our guests. Next week we've got a packed programme for you, but until then, top of the day, bye for now.